Of John. Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you, John, and welcome, Jacques. I just wanted to check on the journal because it is an important internal control. So as per your report, you state that they're independently reviewed, but they're not evidence that they have been, if that's my understanding. And so I just think, Chair, that presumably somebody just throws a signature or does something to indicate. Is that all that's required when you say evidenced? That whoever's independently reviewed them states that they have done so by signature, or I'm not too sure. I presume the journals are all done by electronic. Is that all that you're asking for, John?
Yes, there's some evidence that the review has been undertaken. So if the system can't allow for a sign-off or review indication on it, then print out of the journals, those ones that were selected for review, in some indication that the control actually operated, that independent review did happen.
To me, Chair, it's something that I think needs to be done, and I would look forward to feedback from staff and moving forward that be undertaken.
So if I can just ask the CE, right, because the other David's not with us, maybe the finance team might want to comment her on sitting waiting in the wings. I would expect that in due course we would receive a report from management in terms of what action has been taken prior to receiving the audit management letter for the 2022 year.
Yes, I can assure you we have received this audit and we'll be looking into reporting on it, closing that item out. I can't, as David isn't here, I can't expand on the program he's planning to put in place, but it's something that we'll be actioning.
Okay, so just...
It's Julie here, can I make a comment?
Yeah, can you just speak up, Jules? We can't hear you. And if you could turn your camera on so we could see you, that would be appreciated.
Sorry, not very technical. Can you hear me now?
Not very well.
Not sure how I can get that to be any louder. So is that still no better?
No, but I'll just turn my volume up. So
yeah, this, as Lynn said, the journals are done electronically. So we used to put them in a paper book. Oh, is that better?
Much better.
My ignorance, I didn't have my mic in the right place. So we used to have our journals always be in hard copy books. So therefore it was much easier for them to show the evidence that they had been signed off. And these days we've moved to putting them in spreadsheets because we load them into our system through a spreadsheet. And even like I load all David's journals, for example. So I'm checking his journals and loading them. And David periodically is checking like Kyra's and mine, etc. But what audit we're concerned about was because it's in the spreadsheet, we haven't been putting a signature in there, and they weren't happy that we just dated, like we had the name and dated. So they just, from their point of view, the evidence, like the process is happening, but the evidence they weren't, they didn't, that wasn't good enough from their point of view. So yeah, we just tighten up, on showing that evidence of what is actually happening.
Okay, thank you. And I assume David will have, David Paris will report back to the committee on that in due course with your assistance.
Yes.
Thank you. Are there any other questions, comments on the management letter?
I've just got one, just in relation to the journal entry staff. Is our system in regard to that, and this is a question to John Whittle, is our system in regard to that sort of antiquated, or is there, what's the best practice around that particular aspect?
So it depends on the system functionality that you have. So in your case, and it's not unique to Masterton, some systems do allow the same person to to initiate a transaction and just process it into the system. So you don't need segregation at that point. So journal entries can be processed by one person. So having a post processing review or a review pre to processing is the way you build segregation in, because the system doesn't allow you to do that. So having those processes manually done is not, that's not an issue in itself. I suppose once those processes are agreed to happen, like there should be an independent review or a sporadic check of journals to get comfort that they are being processed correctly. The only way to know that we know that that process is happening is the way that those individual journals are then marked up or ticked off or indicated as having been reviewed.
Thanks.
Thanks, John. Any other questions, comments? I've got one comment. I think this is the shortest management letter I've actually seen this season, John, and I can I see David Hopman smiling? So that's probably a good news story for council. It's there's only a couple of minor issues. Is that fair, John? It's a pretty good management letter. I know you. Sorry, it's a reasonable management letter. I know auditors don't use the word good. You're not allowed to. I know it's in your been removed from your dictionary. So
yeah, I think that's fine. I mean, I think that's a good. I mean, like you say, it's a good outcome. The audit was a good outcome. It was unqualified opinion. We had an emphasis on matter, but really that highlighted a government decision. So there was nothing significant that we raised from our audit, and there's only that one issue which is quite easy to resolve. I think the check is already happening.
Yep.
So we'll do a follow-up on those outstanding recommendations. I think that's probably where the key effort lies, is around the outstanding recommendations, and be good to do a follow-up on those as part of our 22 audit.
Yeah. Well, I'm keen to discuss the next item, which is the procurement policy, which might actually tidy up some of those procurement issues as well. So, all right, no further comment. Thank you, John and Jack. We're looking forward to seeing you at our next meeting. And John, thank you very much for your assistance over the last period of time. Is it 6 years? It
hasn't been that long. So the rotations come up, for other reasons. One of them is turnover of our directors and that as well. I suppose it's always good to have a fresh set of eyes come in as well. So we don't always leave it until 3 years. Jacques picked up all the councils in the Wairarapa, so he's also able to then it gives him a good spread as well. So thanks for those words, Philip. It's been good from my side. Yeah.
Lynn?
I just endorse, Chair, what you've said. Thank you, John, for all your work over the last few years. And I'm not too sure which area you've gone to next, but all the very best. And Chair, I'm happy to remove the recommendation in the report.
Thank you, Mayor Lynn. Do I have a seconder?
I'm happy to second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those against, carried. Right. Thank you very much, team from Audit New Zealand.
Cheers. We'll see you.
Thank you. And we scroll back. So we now go back to, if I can find it, our procurement policy on page 411 of the agenda. It's on screen. And welcome, Matt.
Good afternoon.
So
Yes.
take your report as read and the policy as read. Are there any key highlights, key issues you want to bring to the committee's attention?
I think I just wanted to reflect that this is an update on the existing policy. So it reflects the previous policy council had, but what it does is draws more on that sustainability, both environmentally and community, brings that through to the policy, and it reflects best practice across procurement policies across local government in New Zealand. As part of this review, we looked at what other councils did and what other procurement policies were considered strong, and have tried to reflect this here while also continuing to reflect the uniqueness of Marsden Council.
Thank you. Are there any comments, questions of Matt at this stage?
I just would like to have a bit more clarity around the value Wairarapatanga part of the policy. I know that it's on 412, you discussed part of that, but I just wanted a little bit more elaboration about how that's applied.
Thank you.
Narissa, is this something you might want to jump in on?
Yep, sure. Tēnā tātou. So we have proposed to include a new principle into the procurement policy, which is value-weighted apatanga. And as Tito pointed out, that in the report we talk about there being two key aspects to the value-weighted apatanga principle. So it's about including a weighted upper Māori lens in our procurement planning, which has never been specific to this policy before, and to ensure supplier diversity. We've included in the definition section of the policy a weighted upper tanga definition about what we mean by a weighted upper Māori lens. And on page 419 of this report, which is the policy aspect to it, so it's about making sure that our teams internally have the support that they need and the expertise that they can lean into while they're doing their procurement planning. So working with our internal staff when appropriate to make sure that we've got that weighted upper Māori cultural lens as part of the early stages of the procurement planning process.
Does that answer your question?
It's just basically we'll see what happens. You know, it's new, so thank you. I'm glad to see it's in here, but I think it's probably a matter of time on how it's applied. Kia ora. Thank you.
Just to support what Narissa was saying, there is a commitment from government procurement that those agencies covered under the government procurement rules work towards having 5% of all procurement to Māori business. And while the council isn't bound to that, we will be looking to what those agencies are doing and looking to learn from them as they look to increase their procurement across Māori business.
Thank you. That probably leads me on to the next question. Is there any work being done on how you engage with those Māori businesses in terms of how you would even know what that, how, you know, if you're going to spread a weighted apatanga lens, how would that be applied to those particular businesses? And how is it actually measured in a way?
So as part of the rollout of this policy, we're going to do some staff training, and especially looking at that value-weighted apatanga principle. One of the things that we also talked about when SLT considered the policy last month was making sure that we have access to a list of local Māori organisations, so we know who they are and what kind of services and goods they can provide. Sorry, what was the other part to your question, Tito?
How it's applied, you know, how is it measured? It's probably because it's so new. And have you had any other case scenarios from other councils that have applied this sort of policy, or are we setting a precedent?
There hasn't been any case studies provided yet. I think we're in line with what looks to be happening across government and local government procurement. So I wouldn't want to claim that we're leading, but I think what we are trying to do is reflect what's happening and also grow. I think in terms of that definition of what Māori business is, it's a TPK definition, and it's either a Māori authority as classified by the ARD or a minimum 50% Māori ownership. So they've set some parameters around what Māori business is. So I think it would be measuring against those parameters initially, but also in discussion with our internal staff, just sort of, yeah, as we go, I guess it's something we're gonna learn from and look to develop. So it's a commitment there that obviously we take quite seriously.
Sorry, and just to add to that, on page 423 in the monitoring and evaluation section of the policy, we want to be able to measure the success of this policy by evaluating how a wired upper Māori lens is applied in our procurement planning, but also increasing our procurement with Māori-owned businesses, Pacifica-owned businesses and social enterprises. So those are things that we are committing to as part of being able to measure the success and evaluate the effectiveness of this policy once it's in place.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
We'll just see. I think that's it. We'll just see how it.
Yeah. I think the monitoring in the policy is good, and I think it would be useful in 12 months maybe just to see how we're going against those criteria and what the direction is. We're not going to get there immediately, but what the overall direction is. Councillor Tim.
Thanks, Philip. Hey, on page 421, are those thresholds the same as in the previous policy, and are they consistent with other councils?
They are consistent with other councils, and they do reflect the thresholds in the previous policy.
Great, thanks, Matt.
Question on just on that. So what's what's the process if council officers don't want to follow those thresholds? You just sort of talk through what the process would be.
I guess that would have to be a discussion first with SLT and then with the CE. I think there would have to be clearly documented why those thresholds aren't being followed. So there'd have to be a really strong audit trail and rationale behind that. And depending on how discussions are held with SLT and CE, it might need to be raised to council level as well. I guess that would need to be on a scenario by scenario basis. I wouldn't expect that would arise too often. There's a reason we have those thresholds. Yeah, so I expect it would need to be very clearly documented and reported to ensure that everything can be traced back and ensure that everything is being done correctly.
Yeah, I mean, look. I've got some ideas. Maybe we'll share them offline. But my view is it should always be when someone doesn't do it. It's actually there is a process gone through, like you just talked about, but also that we actually record it in a register, and then that gets reported either to SLT or to council on a regular basis. What I mean by regular is every 3 months or every 12 months or something like that, just so council gets assurance that the policy is actually being followed. Councillor Mayor Lynn and then Councillor Tim, unless David, the Chief Executive wants to cut in.
I'll go to David first, Chair, because he's had his hand up for a while.
Thank you. Sorry.
I'll follow on after that.
Thank you.
Can I just point out that those thresholds, in my experience, have served us reasonably well, mainly because a lot of those decisions that are outside them or do need to be changed are pretty political decisions that we generally bring to council anyway for their authority and confirmation. So yeah, it's quite often that we'd need to deviate, and there's always a good reason generally because those decisions come before council.
Yep.
David Holmes.
It's just referring back to the iwi involvement. I'm really happy with that, as long as the outcome generally is constructive. And I'd just like to see a more cohesive linkage between the two iwi groups here, because I think that's where we're falling down a bit. So I'm all for it, but I just would like to think it's got to be very constructive and well organised and not destructive. And that applies to a lot of groups as well. That's just my thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you, David Holmes. Yep. Lynn, did Tim have your hand up before?
Yep.
Yep. And I'll go back to you, Lynn.
Okay, it was really just the wording on 5 on page 419, which get the best deal for everyone, and it's not necessarily the everyone that I'd be worried about. It's really getting the best public value, which you use in the first sentence, isn't it? Isn't that the driver for it? And getting the best public value means that we're getting the best results from procurement, we're using resources effectively, etc. I know it's semantics, but is getting the best deal for everyone we can't give the best deal for everyone through a procurement process because there's only one supplier. So it was a bit of semantics, but to me, it just didn't quite read right. My thoughts anyway. The other one was picking up your point, Chair, was in the incidents, well, I refer to it as incidents reporting, where there's an exception that someone hasn't followed the due process. So I totally support what you're saying. I suspect that would very rarely happen here, but if it does, then it would need to go to SLT or to council, depending on where the breach was. So just my thoughts, and well done, Matt and Narissa and staff. I think it's great. Thank you.
Could I just quickly comment on the Mayor's point on number 5? That heading, it doesn't feel quite right to me. Unfortunately, when the government procurement framework was written, that was what was decided upon. So we're sort of guided by that. But I think the intention of that principle is what you're saying, Mayor.
Thank you. Tim, Councillor Tim, did you have any comments?
Yeah, I do. Thanks, Philip. Well, just on page, or just in regards to the 6 principles, are those 6 principles consistently applied in a checklist type manner that every time we use the procurement policy?
So that would be the intention. So if and when the policy is endorsed, we will then flow this policy through to our procurement procedures and also the procurement plans, which are held by the project team. So it'd be, we'd take this forward and make sure that these are the guiding principles in those documents as well. The existing procurement policies reflects this already. It's just some tweaking of the words, but those are what we follow when we undertake procurement, as those procurement procedures.
Yep, all 6 every time. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? I've got a couple. You probably can see, I'm not sure you can see on screen, I've highlighted on bottom of page 419. What do you mean by a value of the whole of life rather than the initial cost? I think I would actually like to see some stronger wording, right, in there. And what I like the word is, we're actually reducing the total life cycle cost of procurement. So what we're saying is it's not necessarily about just the capital cost, but it's also the ongoing operational cost. Sometimes cheaper doesn't necessarily mean better in the long term. You can buy something from the warehouse and it might last you 5 years. You might buy something from somewhere else and it might last you 10 years, but it may not be double the cost. So it's getting that, as well as taking into consideration the operating costs. Sometimes if you spend a bit more up front, you can actually reduce the operating costs significantly. So maybe we just need to think about that a bit more. You're nodding your head there, Matt, as you suggested.
That's what that sentence is trying to say. So spelling that out a bit more clearly, yes, we can definitely undertake that. That is the intention of that point.
Yeah. But I think it needs to be quite explicit. But that's Lynn, did you have some comment on that?
No, it was just to say that I had written down taking into account the whole of life costs initially until I read about it on the bottom of page 419.
Yeah.
So I felt comfortable that that's what was meant by that, but don't have a problem if we put some wording around it. But I think whole of life costs means not only the capital outlay, but also the ongoing operating costs.
And also, if I can interrupt, the cost of disposal as well, if you know it.
Yep. And Graham's got his hand up.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Thank you, Lynn. I was going to go to Councillor Graham. Thank you.
I was just going to say that when about it being a benefit to everyone, the one thing that never gets mentioned is the actual contractors and the people providing the services. So you don't, I mean, we've been in a very buoyant period, but the tight period will come again. And you don't want to be beating your contractors over either when things are tight. You need them standing. And we've used 2 contractors in Maine with the sewer and water renewal. And it's been very successful for both parties. So the everyone is, never forget the contractor. We need good contracting firms standing tall through thick and thin. So that was all I was going to add.
Well, couldn't agree more, Graham. You actually need to make sure you've actually got a robust supply chain, including the contractors. Any other comments? I've got one comment in the report on page 413. You talk about there's no communications engagement plan required for this policy, but I'd be keen to think about, are you actually going to take this out to the people, the contracting community, the suppliers and the broadest extent, and say, this is our new policy? Is there any intention to do that?
Sorry.
No, Narissa, there wasn't an intention to do that at this stage. We still have to develop our procedures, or review our procedures against this new policy. Those are the things that the contractors see as how we implement it, rather than the objective. Did Matt or
No, sorry, I've got nothing to add to what you just said.
Okay. All right, nothing further to add? I think it's Graham, have you still got your hand up deliberately, or is it left over from last time?
Left over. I'll get rid of it. Sorry.
No problem. Better be asked twice than not at all. And Tina, you got your hand up as well?
Yeah, it's probably just a wee bit of a follow-on around the implementation side of it. And I'm probably going to offend a few people here. I'm trying hard not to, but if we're talking about actually having Māori in around the design of the procurement process, then we have to be really careful around the implementation and making sure that they are included in how the rollout is going, because if they're not, then they won't. There's going to have to be an education campaign, I think, around this. Otherwise, I don't think it's going to work. And I've seen Ngāi Tahu do the same thing with its own people. And unless you really engage them up front and they understand why you're doing this, what they're trying to achieve, then we are going to have a problem. So I think what Philip's saying around the procurement policy and the implementation is it's really, really important that we get that right. Otherwise, Māori won't be able to join this process.
Thank you, Tina. Any other discussion, comments, questions? Right, so we go back to, so I'm just juggling screens here so everyone can see. Page 411, we've got 3 recommendations there. Now, David, is this being recommended to council, or what's David Hopman, the Chief Executive, or what's the process from here?
I believe this committee has authority to approve this policy. This is one of the policies delegated to it for their approval.
Okay.
I'm right.
Thank you. So what you're saying is we've got the final word. So the question. Thank you. We've got to move.
I'm happy to second.
Thank you.
Can I just ask one more question, Philip?
Absolutely. I was going to come back and got any more questions. Yep. Thank you, Tim.
So Philip, with this policy, when it's in place, if a process goes through and the person who misses out on being the recipient or being the person who awards a contract, for example, can they challenge that based on the policy? If they feel like, for example, clause 2 around being fair to all suppliers isn't being followed, or any of those 6 principles are breached in their views, can that be challenged?
I defer to the chief executive on this one.
Yes, I think any of our policies can be challenged if people feel as though we haven't implemented them correctly. So, and we've got a number of different agencies that they can initially talk to us, and then there's ombudsman and auditors over the top of them. So yeah, we do have to deliver on our policies.
Thank you.
Mr. While you're on, Mr. Chief Executive, we've got basically, we've got a move and a second for the recommendations. I've got a potential 4th one. Now, I'm not sure whether we need to amend it or here. I would actually like to see some form of reporting back on the implementation of the procurement policy in 12 months' time. We may not actually have a committee in 12 months' time. Who knows what's going to happen at the election? But I think we need, maybe it's informally, but I think it would be nice to just have some report back as to the effectiveness of the procurement policy, etc., coming back. I'm not sure your views on that and the views of the committee.
Yeah, well, this is something it's relevant to the management report previously. So the auditors have identified some areas in our procurement training that we will have to, they will audit us on that. So that's part of that follow-up audit, and we will be reporting to them, and that will be part of the audit report next time. So
okay.
I think that would probably be adequate because it's already been flagged as an area that we need to focus on, hence the work we're doing at the moment.
All right, thank you. All right, so I'm happy with that.
I do have something to add also is I like how you said that you wanted to sort of review where, the policy around the implementation stuff. But I think we need to understand how proactive this council will be in engaging with those Māori businesses and groups as well. So in order to even ensure that they are a part of the mix, as Tina has also mentioned, you need to understand who's out there, who's who. So, if we want to have a proactive approach, you want to get the communication out there about engaging Māori businesses to be a part of the procurement process, there needs to be a plan put in place.
Yeah, and as I said, we take that on board. This is a new part of our procurement focus coming out of some central government direction. It's a work in progress on how it's going to roll out, and we will have to keep on top of it. So the devil's in the detail, and that's coming up.
Okay.
Thanks, David.
I just what the chief executive has said, I think is important. I think I'll be looking forward to receiving the audit management report, and then probably any actions out of that we can actually take further, including developing a monitoring report if required going forward. So we've got a move and a seconder for the recommendations. Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those against, carried. Our next item is, if I got it right, yep, 426, our service provision report. Who have we got online to answer any questions?
Sorry, our manager of community facilities, Corin, is actually on bereavement leave today.
Oh.
Unfortunately, he hasn't been able to. I'm hoping I will be able to answer questions.
All right. Well, in that case, we'll take the report as read. And are there any questions of the Chief Executive? Mayor Lynn?
Thank you, Chair. At the council meeting at the last audit and risk, we asked about the Aratoi service agreement and just wondered, do you know if there's been any progress on that? It's now expired. So I think from just frantically looking at the previous report, I think it was about customer satisfaction, of setting the key performance areas around customer satisfaction. It would be good to have that service agreement and the MOU officially signed off. I'll leave you to follow that up with Corin when he's back on deck.
I can't confirm, well, it hasn't been signed off yet, but I will get back to you with exactly when, where it is, and how far away it is.
Are there any questions, comments, any more comments of the Chief Executive on this? No? Can we have a
yeah, sorry, there, yeah, there is.
Thank you. Yep.
It was just around the no, I'll wait till it. Sorry, I'm looking at the destination Wairarapa one. That's okay.
Okay, all right. Thank you. So you're happy to move the recommendation, though, you, Councillor Tina, for that?
Yes, I am. I'm more than am. Yep.
We've got a second, Councillor Brent. All right. All those in, no further discussion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, carried. Our next item is destination Wairarapa. Narissa.
Thank you, Chair. We'll take the destination Wairarapa second quarter report as read, and Matt and I will be happy to take questions. Kia ora.
Yeah, I do have a question.
Yep. Thank you, Tina.
Yeah, it's just an actually, I suppose it relates to the audit to Aratoi and Nuku'ura. Maybe we actually moved it in this direction, but I noticed there's no financials, and I see it as a service provision report, but I just wanted to know where things were at. I think just in times of COVID, it's quite handy to know where everyone's tracking financially. So if the general consensus is that we don't need it in a quarterly report like this, and we only get it once a year, then I'm okay with that. But I just think with this wobbliness around impacts on organisations like these, it might be quite useful to see the balance sheets.
Any comment from staff on that? I thought, correct me if I'm wrong, Harriet, I thought that information was available to councillors if required, the detail.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so the info, if you require the information, thank you. All right, no further questions or comments on this. Can I have a mover for the recommendation, please? Thank you, Mayor Lynn. Seconded, Councillor Tim. All those in favour, please say aye. 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 Carried. Our next item is our non-financial report on page 439. I saw Karen somewhere before. We'll take the report as read, Karen, but are there any highlights or key issues you want to bring to the committee's attention?
We have Tanya online, and I'll let Tanya take you through those.
Thank you.
Apologies, I'll just put my camera on. Doing that. Kia ora. I guess the key highlight was around our water area has continued to perform very well. We have had improvements in the building space. If you recall, Q1, there were some challenges the team were facing, and we have seen that turn around and improve in Q2. We've also got a discussion there just around COVID and the impacts that are continuing to impact measures, particularly in our customer-facing spaces like the recreation centre and the library. Beyond that, I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you for that. Any questions? No questions. Get off lightly. All right. If there's no questions.
I'm just having trouble with my computer. Yes, I have one question.
Yeah, thank you.
It's around the stuff around the pools.
Page.
Am I on the right bit?
Page. What number are you?
It's right down the bottom when we've got that graph. Sorry, I'm still juggling between my two computers.
I can put it on screen if you like it.
454, is it?
454.
Or,
And it's the swimming pools, the fact that we haven't done any swimming pools. And I just wondered.
Oh, sorry, no. I was looking at the
Swimming
trust
pool
account.
inspections.
Yeah, swimming pool inspections.
I've been, yeah, under
Right at the
regulatory.
end. Yep, right at the end. Look, I just wondered whether there was any thought given it to developing any policy around pools being able to be self-inspected. So, I mean, we've made some changes around building where people can provide photos. So in various stages of the compliance, is there any possibility to develop a policy framework that allows people to self-assess their pools based on some criteria, send in photos, etc.?
I would have to defer that to, is Stephen May online at
Yes,
all?
he is. Welcome, Stephen.
Welcome. Great suggestion, Councillor. Never say never, but we are dealing with human life at the extreme in the pool inspection area, and you'd have to be very certain of the veracity of what you're getting via customers. So something that we could look into, but there'd have to be a bit of some real robust thinking around it.
Yep,
Okay.
totally get it, but I just, it's some of the building stuff is also about life as well. So it's not doable.
It's we can report that we've started those inspections for the summer. They're underway, but that's a question that perhaps we can do some further work on.
Thank you. Good suggestion, but yeah, also I think I'm not quite sure. We've also got to comply with the appropriate act as well in terms of council's responsibilities. So unfortunately, this is the world we live in. Often we don't get to determine the criteria in which we've actually got to evaluate whether someone passes or fails, just like the Building Act.
I totally understand that.
Yeah, but good suggestion. Thank you. Any more further comments on the report or the measures? I think we're doing reasonably well here, Mr. Chief Executive. Is that a nod? It's a nod from Karen anyway. Right, so can I have a mover for the recommendation on page 439? I'll move. Do I have a seconder? Oh, thank you. When I can't quite see you down the bottom, you tend to flick around my screen sometimes, so you disappear on me occasionally. All right, so I've got to move in a seconder. All those, any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, carried. Our next item is what have we got? Health and checking. Yeah, Health and Safety Quarterly Report, page 458. Ben, welcome, Ben.
Right, thank you. Just to make people aware, there was a late change to page 459 relating to the COVID vaccination policy. Point 3 was removed. That was taken from a previous draft, so we've updated the document.
Yep.
Things of note is really around our COVID approach. It's an ongoing piece of work that's taking, as a complex piece of work, but it's progressing apart from that, I'll take the report as read.
Okay, thank you, Ben. I think COVID is the front of just about everyone's mind, unfortunately. I think the issue is we just don't know how long this is going to go on for. And I'm going to ask, at a very brief discussion with the Chief Executive yesterday, I think the well-being of our staff should be our priority, as then our well-being of the community. Whether there's any comments from either the Chief Executive or councillors?
No, well, we've been living this for 2 years now, and one thing is things are going to change. We've got more and more COVID in our community now, and it's going to get larger. We're pretty comfortable that our protocols and procedures we've got in place will enable us to continue delivering our critical services. We may not be able to deliver all our services when the numbers get greater, just because we'll run out of potentially not have the staff to do it. But we're very focused on making sure our critical services of water and wastewater and roading and those sort of areas are maintained. But we're now in phase 2 of RED. We keep coming up with different that's around our RAT testing. We're working through on how we're going to best deliver that, especially when numbers increase. So there is very much more work to be done in this area to make sure we keep on top of it. So as I said, it's a work in progress, and we do need to be flexible in responding to whatever develops.
Any comments from the members of the committee? Lynn?
Just a comment really from what I see as Mayor, and obviously the impact of Omicron will have an impact on staff as it spreads through our community. Staff, more staff will have to work from home if they've got sick children or themselves are sick. And just, I suppose, for all of us to recognise some of the things we may need to reprioritise on what our expectations are about what can be delivered, and the pressures that staff are on at the moment with all the reforms that are happening and all information that's required to be provided. So it's just a bit of a heads up really that staff are busy. I mean, the events over the weekend just add to that workload. So it's a discussion that we may need further on when we get a better sense of the impact of Omicron on our community, but particularly on our staff and what we're able to deliver.
I concur with that. It's not going to be an easy ride for some people. All right, no further discussion. So if we go back to page 458, we've got a recommendation there.
I'm happy to move, Chair.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Well, I'm not sure who got there first. I think Tim got there by a very quick show of hand. I think I saw the hand move before the thumbs went up. Thank you, Councillor Tim. Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, carried. Thank you. Next item is our financial report. Mr. Paris is away, and I understand we've got a couple of whoops, sorry about that, team. I just people from the finance team standing in for David if we've got any specific questions.
Yes, so both Kyra and Julie are online if needed.
Oh, okay, thank you.
So yeah, if we take the report as read,
yep.
A summary of where we stand at 6 months, and there's also a little forecast of where our capital projects are forecast to land by the end of the year. Yeah, if we have got questions that I can answer, Julie, or we can take it back to our manager of finance. Hopefully we can answer those.
Any questions? I've got one, and it's at the bottom of the report, and I know there's been some talk about it, but just the rates receivable, we have been tracking very well. And what's the finance team's gut feel in terms of where we're likely to end by 30th of June?
Yeah, and that's where David is saying he's pretty sure that he's happy that it will be back on track. So we've been, as we have been doing for a long time, pushing the direct debit as a the best way to collect the rates. So when you pay by direct debit, the rates due are spread over all the installments, so that we, like if you pay monthly, so that they're going to be paid in time by the 30th of June. So when you look where you are each month, there will be balances that show as being unpaid, but they actually are in our payment plan. And that's why he's making that that comment there, our expectation that our unpaid rates will track back closer to historical data as at the 30th of June. So the rates team do a good job of following up and making payment arrangements with people when they are falling behind. So David's not unduly worried at this stage and is feeling that we're on track.
Okay. And also just confirm my understanding is normally in the paragraph below the graph, it talks about making demands on the more, I've got to be careful, the mortgagor, right? The holder of the mortgage to make payment, and that has been delayed. So that would be, so we will see a greater recovery in the next 6 months because of that.
Yeah.
So that's part of so it's the direct debit, and that combined will then hopefully put us back.
Sorry, I was just stressing the direct debit, but yes, definitely both.
Yeah. Councillor Graham? You're on mute, Graham.
Oh, sorry, must have double tapped it. Hey, 492. I mean, I'm like a broken record on this, but it said stormwater ran at 7.3% less than planned, and I got fairly involved with the staff last weekend. Just this water tabling and culvert clearing under our maintenance contract, I just really don't think it's getting done. I know there's a lot of pressure on contractors at the moment and pressure on us, but why is it always seems to be stormwater's at the bottom of the ladder, yet it causes the most damage when we get an event like this? So just wondering if, I know the reason probably is just lack of resources, but block culverts, it does my head in.
Well, there's a couple of, we've actually, because we've got the PG, the stimulus funding for water, we've actually been doing a lot of stream cleaning over the last 4 months. Those are the same contractors that we use for our other maintenance, that's city care, and so we've actually done a lot more work with stream cleaning, but again, you're right, the resources are limited to spread between the two of them. So we're above budget if you include that extra work that was done. But we still need to deliver on the rest of it.
Yeah, thank you. I knew what the answer would be. Cheers.
Any other questions, comments? You got off easily there, Julie, and David will have to go away. David will have to go away more often, won't he? You're on mute.
I was going to say, now that I've worked out my technology, how to do it, I didn't really need it much.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Philip.
All right. So we go back to the recommendation. Do we have a mover? Thank you, Brent. And seconded by Lynn.
second. Nope.
Oh,
That's all right.
so I saw Lynn's hand first. Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, carried. Now that concludes the public part of the meeting. I will just unshare my screen. We go, right. So we now need to have a mover to move into public excluded.
Happy to move.
I'm happy to second it.
Thank you. And I think all those in favour, please say aye.
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 Those against, carried. And we will just wait.